Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for subscribing to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Your support makes everything we do possible. I am Leroy Chapman. I am one of the managing editors here at the AJC, and I love these because these are the moments that we get to have a conversation with you. And so in addition to all the great journalism that we do, one of the things we want to do with briefings like this is to have an unfiltered conversation with you. And this is about one of my favorite topics. This year is the first year of the Juneteenth holiday. It means plenty to African Americans. It means plenty to Atlantans. And this is our chance for us to go deeper and to talk about what this year has meant, and for us to go deeper with two of our best and brightest. One is Ernie Suggs, one is Nedra Roan. You'll hear from them later, but I want to also talk a little bit about how this subscriber briefing will go. We have 30 minutes. We'll kick it off and we'll talk to both Nedra and Ernie. And later on, we will get to ask questions of them, and I'll be moderating. And so I will direct your questions to them. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And we will I'll allow Ernie and Nedra to both introduce themselves. They've dedicated a lot of time to this topic, and certainly when it comes down to our new newsletter, which is unapologetically ATL, they are integral to the production of that. And they wake up every morning thinking about the type of conversation they need to have with Atlanta, with especially Black Atlanta, and that's what that email is aimed toward. So I'll go ahead and kick the things off, and I will go first to Ernie Suggs.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Leroy, for having me. And thank you all subscribers for joining us today. You mentioned that Nedra and I are the best and the brightest. I'm not sure which is which, who is who, but my name is Ernie Suggs, and I've been at the paper for since 1997. It's about 25 years, covering race and culture. And now, as Leroy said, I'm the co-editor with my co-host today, Nedra Roan of Unapologetically ATL newsletter. So subscribe to that as well. Nedra?
I am Nedra Roan. I have been here since 2006. I'm going to say that I'm the best of the best and brightest, but I don't know. Maybe I'm the brightest too. I don't know. I'm the current lifestyle columnist, and as Ernie said, the co-host of our Unapologetically ATL newsletter. I'm very excited to be here this evening talking about Juneteenth. One of the things that struck me about this topic was a poll last week from Gallup showing that 59% of Americans now know what Juneteenth actually is. So I think that is certainly an accomplishment, especially over last year when that number was closer to 37%. And, I think that part of that, of course, is the attention that's been given to this holiday as a federal holiday. But also I think that we are in a moment where people are starting to learn more about these issues, be more interested in these types of issues. And part of that education and awareness and understanding comes from stories like the one that we recently ran in our newsletter that Ernie wrote. And Ernie, I'll let you talk a little bit about that story, which really gave a framework for understanding how Juneteenth has gotten to where it is now.
Yeah, and Nedra, you talked about how the polls are showing that Juneteenth is much more popular and known now. And I think that part of the reason for that is that over the last 2 or 3 years, we've been going through so much. There's been, the whole thing with Black Lives Matter, with the COVID situation, that we are looking for ways to celebrate. We're looking for ways in which we can express our cultural differences. We can express our cultural beauty. And I think Juneteenth comes at a perfect time to kind of express that. And the article that you wrote, that you talked about, I looked at how do we mark Juneteenth? How do we celebrate it? Obviously, Juneteenth came at a time when we were marking the end of slavery officially in Texas. So how do we mark the greatest sin in American history, slavery? Do we celebrate? Do we have a cookout? Do we march? Do we use this as an opportunity to educate or mentor or to do public service? So I think that as this new holiday is approaching, but as we kind of sit down and kind of define what this new holiday is, we're also defining how we mark it, how we celebrate it. And today, I had to work today. You had to work today, unfortunately. That's another story. But people celebrate and people mark things in different ways. And I had a lot of friends and colleagues who had cookouts yesterday or went to marches yesterday. So as we move forward, I think that Juneteenth is a wonderful idea, a wonderful concept, and I think it's only going to get bigger. I think those numbers are going to go up. And my story, it just kind of looked at the history. And you can find the story on ajc.com, and we can put it in the chat. But it kind of looks at the history of Juneteenth as well as, where we are now as a country, where we are now as a people.
Yeah, I mean, I think the flip side of some of the numbers, of course, is that 40% of the American population still has no idea what Juneteenth is.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I think is important when we're talking about numbers like that is when you see people start to get a greater awareness of what the holiday is, you start to see more support for it. One of the things that I find very disheartening in this conversation is people saying, oh, why don't we just merge Juneteenth with July 4th? It's the same thing, it's celebrate freedom. Let's just put it all together. And to me, that shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what this holiday is. We also see people saying, that's a Texas holiday. That doesn't have anything to do with me. Again, I think it's also a lack of understanding about what Juneteenth is and what it's meant to be. And the final thing that I've heard, which really I find upsetting, is why do we need another Black holiday? We already have MLK Day. And, again, like the idea that there would be a holiday that cannot be celebrated by all Americans is very disturbing to me. And I think when people start to educate themselves better and understand more the meaning and the relevance of a moment like Juneteenth, a moment in history, that we start to move away from that type of thinking. To me, it shows really a continued sort of erasure of the contributions of enslaved people to the foundation of our country. And so that speaks to very much the need to have something like Juneteenth be recognized federally. So, however you celebrate it, if you choose not to celebrate it, I think that we should at the very least recognize its need, the need for it to be present.
Yeah, I've always found the conversation about whether or not we should celebrate it and the fact that we have two quote unquote Black holidays. I've always found those conversations very weird because, we have 11 federal holidays and Martin Luther King Jr. is a holiday named after Martin Luther King, but it's not a Black holiday. Juneteenth is a holiday that marks an event, but it's not a Black holiday. So I think that when you talk about these 11 federal holidays, if you try to say that because Juneteenth and because Martin Luther King Jr. Day are named for Black people or named for Black events, that kind of minimizes it. And it kind of, like you said, it kind of takes away from what it's supposed to be. It kind of takes away from what these holidays are supposed to do in terms of celebrating America and marking America and showing how America is different, how America is diverse. And, if you look, if you feel that strongly about it, I'm pretty sure you're still taking the days off. I'm pretty sure you're still barbecuing or doing whatever you can do on Martin Luther King Day or Juneteenth. A lot of, in my story, a lot of companies had today off, public and private had today off. And, if you feel that strongly about it, then maybe you should work. But it minimizes, that argument kind of minimizes what all of these holidays are and what Juneteenth actually really means and what it's supposed to represent.
Yeah.
I have a question
Sure.
already. I'm sorry. And it's a question from me. So please forgive me. I know this is a pretty informal conversation, but here's this. I'm from South Carolina. I've been able to trace both sides of my family to colonial America. And in fact, know the families that owned my family. So the idea of slavery is something that I've studied because once you start looking at your own genealogy, you can see very specifically the people who would have been alive during that time. And then you start looking at what their lives are like. So my question is this, what kind of advice do you give for folks who want to also understand what that moment is and how their own families might have either received the news, where they were, and how this entire idea of delivering that news of freedom might have happened not only in Texas but elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that to me is most relevant about Juneteenth, the way we define it right now. I mean, obviously there were these events happening all over the country. There were, generals riding through and reading executive orders to people in all states, right? Not just in Texas. But one of the reasons that I think Texas and focusing on that particular moment is important is because Texas in many ways, and if you're from Texas, I'm gonna apologize in advance. But at the time, I feel that Texas was a slaveholder's dream. It was the one place where you could go and you could be relatively free of conflict, in the sense that, there was there was no battle of the war that was lost in Texas. Texas at one point was its own republic. And so that was a place where I think this idea of slavery was very firmly entrenched, and this idea that you could go there and be a slaveholder and do that outside of the views of everyone else was very firmly entrenched in that place. So when you think about what happened there with, these people here finally learning that they were free, that to me becomes symbolic to the rest of the country. I certainly, my family is from Louisiana and Mississippi, and I don't know what what happened there. I think you're very lucky, Leroy, to have been able to trace that and to know for certain how your family was directly connected to that, because I don't know, and I wouldn't even know how to find out. So for me, for someone like me, I have to grab on to Juneteenth because that is all I really have in that moment.
Now, let me ask you a question, and I'll start out. But I don't know the first time I've ever heard of Juneteenth. I can't recall the first time I heard of it. Maybe in college, maybe living in Atlanta for so long. We always have these festivals, but it seems like it's kind of a holiday that kind of sprang on us. President Biden signed it into law last year. This is the first full year that we were celebrating it. So, do you recall when you first heard? You tell this great story about your sister going to school in the Midwest and her spring breaks. But do you know the
Yes,
first
which
time
I
you heard
later
about it?
learned had nothing to do with Juneteenth. That's
Okay.
Galveston
Okay.
is just a place where people want to go. It's a spring break hangout, right? So
Okay.
I had nothing to do with Juneteenth. But I do remember when I actually first, I was watching a documentary, and I wish I could remember the name. I was in my late 20s, and there was a family, interestingly enough, Leroy, a family on there who was talking about how their relatives had been on a plantation in Texas and had been working 2 years past, when they could have walked off this plantation. And I remember hearing that, and I was horrified. I did not associate it at the time with Juneteenth, but I do remember calling a friend of mine and telling her, girl, did you know that people were still working 2.5 years after slavery? Did you have any idea? She was like, no, I had no idea. She didn't know either, And I don't know, I think I probably didn't put it all together until even later than that. So I'm going to say probably in my early 30s is when it really crystallized for me what Juneteenth was. And it was only because I went looking for information. It wasn't coming to me. I grew up in Chicago. I didn't learn about it in school. I have an 11-year-old daughter who has not learned about it in school. Everything that she knows about it is something that I've taught her. So I just feel like there is an opportunity for education here.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that so few people know about it, I think, like you're right, this is the time for us to learn about it, to know what's going on with it, to kind of and also kind of understand, like you mentioned in Texas, what was going on in 1865, in 1863, and 1864, and during Reconstruction, as to how African Americans and formerly enslaved people kind of navigated themselves through America, how we navigated. And I think that right now we're at this kind of culmination of kind of coming to grips with what that navigation meant and how that navigation looked. So this is a perfect time, although the holidays here, but it's kind of the perfect time to have those conversations with kids and with ourselves to kind of understand it and know what we're dealing with, know how we're dealing with this.
Also, Ernie, a perfect time to take some questions. So
All
let
right.
me start. So our first question is this. So what are your thoughts on people raising the red, black, and green banners as opposed to the actual Juneteenth banner? with its American colors of red, white, and blue?
Well, I mean, I think we all know what the green, black, and red. Was it green? Yeah, the green, black, and red flag symbolize. Or the green, black, and red, or green, black, and yellow. We know what those flags symbolize.
Red, black, and green. You got it.
Yeah,
You got it right.
we know what those flags symbolize in terms of Black liberation and Black power. But I think it also kind of goes to what Nedra's saying about people learning about Juneteenth. I think even the Juneteenth flag is foreign to a lot of people. A lot of people see that flag, they don't know what that flag is. We're still learning what that flag is, learning what those symbols are, what each of the symbols mean. So I don't have a problem with raising the Black liberation flag or those other flags in terms of kind of celebrating it, as long as we're celebrating it. But again, we're taking baby steps in terms of understanding what this holiday is and what Juneteenth is.
I think we also have to, give a little bit of respect to the fact that people have been celebrating this holiday for a long time, and they've been doing it in their own ways. The fact that it is now a federally sanctioned holiday doesn't make it any more valid, or the ways in which people decide to do that any more valid. I don't know that we have to have a very strict standard for how that's done. I think people are finding their way, and again, like Ernie said, I'm just happy that people are participating.
Okay, well, we have another question, so we'll try to answer as many as we can. So this one is about what we've seen lately in the news about commercialism. So what steps do you think we'll need to take, or anyone needs to take, to make sure that the holiday is not lost to commercialism, that it keeps its intent and it isn't lost to just barbecues and white sales?
I mean, that's a great question. And the story that I had in Sunday's paper that Nedra referred to talks about commercialism. It talks about, we talk about these Black, quote unquote, Black holidays. The last, this is the 11th holiday. The 10th holiday was Martin Luther King Day, which was written into law in 1983 by Ronald Reagan, as a matter of fact. But you will notice that Martin Luther King's Day, Martin Luther King, there's no mattress sales, there's no used car sales, there's no Martin Luther King Jr., sales at Best Buy or wherever, because the family has been able to kind of keep that. And we have, as a nation, been able to keep that as a solemn holiday. And when Mrs. King was lobbying Congress and she was lobbying the presidents, since the day after her husband was assassinated in 1968, that this would be a holiday that, under their motto, this is a day on, not a day off. So what we're going to do is we're going to have public service. We're going to do public service. We're going to clean up communities. We're going to march. We're going to tutor kids. We're going to, do all the stuff that kind of uplifts Martin Luther King's name and uplifts us as a race and as a culture. So now we have Juneteenth, and we saw how Walmart had the Juneteenth ice cream. We saw the museum in Indianapolis had the watermelon flavored salad. So I think that, again, as we're kind of figuring out what this holiday is, the head of the local NAACP told me that what we need to do is figure out what our narrative is, and it's going to be up to us. If we want this to be a Black holiday, as people are saying, that we have to kind of define it now to say, this is going to be a holiday where we're going to do this, where we're not going to sell out, we're not going to have sales, we're not going to let this fall to commercialism. So I know that's a tough road to hoe, because you see 4th of July, which is the celebration of the country's freedom. You see Veterans Day, you see Memorial Day, which are all these holidays that are supposedly solemn, but they have fallen to commercialism. So it's going to be very, very difficult, I think, for Juneteenth to avoid that fate.
Thanks, Ernie. Any thought on that, Nedra?
Yeah, I would like to say, I appreciate everything that Ernie said, and I agree with a lot of it.
You're not going to disagree with me, are you?
However, I also feel that, when I think about this holiday and what it meant to people and what it means to people, on the one hand, yes, there is a very solemn nature to it. But on the other hand, it is a day of jubilation and happiness. I can't imagine, had I been, there and someone told me, you can go wherever you want to go right now, I would be, beside myself after having been enslaved for my entire life. So I want to say that there should be an element of celebration and jubilation and fun. And if that means that you want to go on a shopping spree, then maybe you should do that. Just do it with a Black business.
Well, okay, there you go. Do it with the Black business. But I mean, but I do think we have to be careful, though, that this does not become, a holiday where we wake up and everything on television is go out to the mall and go shopping.
Well,
I
think
do think we
there's always personal choice involved in that, and if, we have free will, we don't have to do what the commercial tells us to do. So the commercial can be there and it can, invite you to come out and do whatever you want to do. And if you are that type of person who feels that that is something you need to do, then you can do that. If you are the type of person who feels that you would prefer to serve or to educate yourself, you can do that as well. I don't know that I would be offended if I saw a Juneteenth sale. I mean, to be honest, there have been many celebrations in Atlanta this past weekend that didn't have a whole lot to do with Juneteenth.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But I'm sure the people attended and I'm sure they had fun and I'm sure they were celebrating. And, I think that's an element of it. There has to be part of this that is about uplift.
So the question is, did you buy the Juneteenth ice cream?
No, but I did buy this.
Oh, okay.
You see that? Yeah. So
no, show the people.
But it was a book that I read and I enjoyed.
Okay.
All right.
Tell us the book. You flashed the book.
Sorry, I thought you could see it. It's On Juneteenth by Annette Gordon-Reed, Pulitzer Prize winning author. It's a very small book, a very quick read, but it is part autobiographical. She talks a little bit about growing up in Texas. And for me, I felt like it really enhanced my knowledge and understanding of Texas itself and how things happen. I don't have any, I had a few relatives that were, raised in Texas, but I don't have a huge connection to the state. And so it was nice to read that and to really enhance my own understanding of it.
All right. Okay.
Well, we have another question, and for you subscribers, Ernie and Nedra have been arguing for years, but that's what journalists do. It's part of the job, and there are not many workplaces ever where part of your job description is to go and to argue forcefully every day, but return the next day and be friends. But we managed to do it. So let's get this next question, and this is about reparations. So this person wants to know whether the newfound interest in Juneteenth and what happened might influence the national conversation about reparations. Thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. And to be totally honest with you, this question right here is the first time I've heard that question in the context of Juneteenth. So not to say that I'm, behind a rock or anything, but I think that is illustrative of how that's probably not going to be a conversation immediately, at least. Reparations, we've been talking about reparations for 150 years. And there have always been these fits and starts about a conversation to have it. And, I just don't think that this is it either. I just think that, we're still a long ways off from that.
How about you, Ned?
So once again,
See, now I think you're just doing it on purpose.
I might be, but that's okay. I do think that this can invite more relevant and significant conversations about reparations, if for no other reason than it has created an awareness that did not exist before. And I refer back to those numbers, that I mentioned early on with, 60%, almost 60% of Americans now knowing what Juneteenth is, recognizing this moment as a moment of importance for the country, as opposed to, something that happened in one part of the nation. And I think when you start to think like that, I think that you're able to expand your thinking about other things. I think reparations has gotten caught in a conversation that is very narrow, and hopefully people being able to view these moments in history as moments for all of us as Americans will also help to push that conversation forward as well.
Well, we are got about 5 minutes left, and there is one thing I wanted to do for both Nedra and Ernie. And if you look at Ernie's background, there's a book there that he wrote. It's Many Lives of Andrew Young, and it's available at your local bookstore and online. But he is the author, and pick it up. And
I hate to be that guy.
but you are. Yeah, you hate to be that guy, but you are. And Nedra, you guys may know her from this, but she also writes her own column, her real life column, and it publishes some Sundays, but it's please be on the lookout for it. And Nedra, if you want to give your own personal plug to your column, please do so now.
Okay, Real Life with Nedra Roan, catch it every Thursday in Living, also every other Sunday in Metro online. It's usually up on, when is that? Wednesday mornings at 6 a.m. and alternate Friday mornings at 6 a.m. I will also plug a new feature called Real Life Relationships. That is something that I started during the pandemic because I felt like Metro Atlantans needed a place to talk about their relationships. Those are personal essays that readers have written to talk about relationships ranging from romantic relationships to familial relationships. So always looking for people to contribute to that and to be interested in writing. We offer a small honorarium if that's any incentive. So enroan@ajc.com, let me know.
And just to be clear, because I probably have the lowest IQ of the panel, honorarium is actually money, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to be clear about that from the low IQ section. All right, so we're about to wrap. You guys have been generous with your time, and we want to be respectful of the fact that you have offered us 30 minutes, and we have about 3 minutes left. So one of the things I wanted to also be clear about is that we've got a survey, and it's going to be in your inbox. We want to get your thoughts about today's event. We have other events like this that center on food, on politics, sports. We are covering the gamut of what the AJC covers, and we want to make sure you have access to the people who work for you on your behalf as subscribers. So we have 2 minutes left, so I will turn back to Nedra and Ernie with your closing thoughts. I think I've exhausted the questions.
Well, thank you. Thanks again to all the subscribers for coming. Thank you for subscribing to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It definitely means a lot to us, and it kind of inspires us to do good work. So we appreciate you guys coming. And also, I put in the chat, I think you all can see it. Please subscribe to the Unapologetically ATL newsletter. That's what Nedra and I, as well as Naja Parker, who's on the call as well, we put that together. It comes out every Thursday. The link is right there, and we have some really, really good stuff. Last Thursday was all about Juneteenth, and we just kind of run the gamut as to what's going on in Black Atlanta, what's going on in the world. So thank you for subscribing. If you already are a subscriber, and if you're not, please do.
All right, Nedra, you get the last word.
All right, so I think I'm going to sign off by just talking about people who have asked how they can support, Juneteenth or the African Americans in Metro Atlanta, people, that sort of thing. And the one thing I want to say about that is I feel like one of the biggest things that we can do is to shift the way that we view moments like this, like Juneteenth. I think we have to look at things through a very different lens, a lens that has traditionally been ignored. And we have to start centering our stories on people of color. And in doing so, I think that we start to really take action in many of the ways that are relevant and important. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all. And this has been another subscriber event, and there will be more, and we will be in touch with each of you. But again, thanks to everyone for your support, because we cannot do this without you. Signing off.